Yeah, for sure. So Brian B Dougie on the internet and on Twitter, and working on a little product called Open Sauced, Sauced Open here on Twitter. It's in my bio, and we've been actually collecting a bunch of data on GitHub projects that are open sourced, and building some insights around those. So what we've been doing is like reaching out to like maintainers and open source program offices to find out some basically, as a startup founder, I found out some pain points, and then we've been building features around those pain points. So if you've got a lot of open source that you manage, we're building a platform to get insights to not just repositories but entire organizations. So a lot of companies have multiple organizations, and we're building a way to have like a sort of high level view of what's happening.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to it anyway because we were using, I mean, we're not that big, but like data is very sparse on GitHub, and the more data you have, the better you can sort of, position yourself and do stuff. So definitely looking forward to using some of those things. Anyway, we might as well start talking about stuff, no? I mean, it's 7:03, where
Yeah, let's
I
do
am
it.
anyway. It's 10:03 where you are. So I'm one of the co-hosts, Ivan Burazin, and also the co-founder of Daytona, and we launched our open source project 2 days ago, probably to the minute, 25, 48, 49 hours ago, and doing really well. We invited Brian also to chat, but we also have here members of the team. And under the Daytona logo here, we have Nicola, which is our head of growth, which did a lot of the stuff here. Nicola, do you want to sort of intro yourself real quick?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm just playing with this. I'm trying to figure out spaces, and it's a little bit buggy to be honest. So please, Ivan, lead, and I will jump in as
Sure.
possible.
Okay, and so for the third time, for all you here, we have Chad who's doing a live YouTube stream. So if you want to do that, he's trying to do this in parallel. I don't know if you can say hi, Chad, or you're on the stream, but yeah. Awesome. We also have Francesco here. I just did a live stream with him like an hour ago. Francesco, we put you as speaker, so feel free to say hi.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me in the space. And what do you mean by it's not working? It is working. Even if it's working, even if it's buggy, if it's working, it's still way okay. And yes, I tried this out with Ivan in a real test, and it went very well. So I'm here to know more, of course, and I can even give my honest and hot opinion because I just tried out.
Thanks so much. And so just to start off on like the theme and like open sourcing our baby, I just wanted to, that's the title of the thing. Maybe it makes sense to chat about how to, like I got a lot of input inbound from people in the sense of like, how did we open source it and sort of like, I guess the thing is like become trending on GitHub, right? Like that's sort of the goal, especially at the beginning. And I think we did a bunch of things here and I called a lot of people, including you, Brian, sort of for like tips and tricks on what to do, and I called like probably 20 people. So I'd definitely say reach out and read everything that you can. Brian, do you want to sort of kick off with your tips that you did, and I can sort of like jump into what we did and what we found on this. By the way, Brian was the one of the first developer advocate. What was the title
Yeah,
specifically? I know you said
my
it.
yeah, my title was developer advocate at GitHub. So I was the first one to own the title. But GitHub started in 2008, so every engineer was like an advocate for the product. Um, I joined in 2018, so 10 years in, and so they made like an official developer relations team, and I joined that. So, but yeah, spent 5 years there, and I got to see a lot of these things like the GitHub Explore page, get like this current iteration. I got to learn how the algorithm works on the inside, and yeah, I talk in more details about that, but or I won't divulge like too many secrets. But to be
Okay.
quite honest, like
Hopefully
it's
this
not
fixed
really
it.
that complicated.
So Nico was saying that he can't hear me, but
And
hopefully
what
he
I
can hear me
learned,
now.
and I told you, Ivan, is like it
But
is all about
we
having a
are
moment.
listening
So
to the
like I think
stream for the Twitter
what GitHub
space, and then
is,
I'm
or sorry, the
chatting
way
in
you
here.
sort
I'm
of leverage
also in the
GitHub is
Twitter
kind of similar
space,
how folks are
so
using
we've got a
Product
little
Hunt.
inception going, and I will
And
be
like we have this
working
like
on
Product Hunt is like not what it
dev
used to be
container
be
and
quite honest,
Dockerfile, which
despite
is
of
what I've
like
got up
the
on the
and the CEO
screen.
is like on a
Let me make it
campaign
a little
of
bigger for
getting
y'all.
people to
But then
trust that
we'll
product
start
again.
hacking on it while we're
But
listening to
it's
the
about
Twitter.
getting at least 100. Basically, I'll just flat out say like 100 stars in the first day that you open source a project will probably end up getting you trending. And that's mainly because like anything new that gets that enough attention, it triggers enough attention in the algorithm. So that's a thing that it's not like a clear science. It's just based on averages on projects that open it. And the other thing is like having something tangible for people to use and try out. So a lot of people will open source a README or a Markdown page, and that's usually pretty underwhelming unless it's like a really good manifesto. But the fact that Daytona actually had a product you could use that you all have been working on for a while, it made it a lot easier to make a sticky experience when you open sourced.
Yeah, it was also like the first day we went out, we got, I think it was 1,000. The first day so far was like 1,000 stars, and then we didn't get on trending, which was weird. But we got today, a day after. So I guess the algorithm does have like other complexities. It's not just like flat out. I assume it's not just flat out stars, but there's other things, forks, people, how long your organization has been there. I'm assuming something like that. But stars are obviously the easiest thing to count.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'll be honest. The algorithm for the trending is really mainly around stars because a lot of what GitHub, like everything that GitHub's been built is not their main product. Has always been like a side project that turns into something else. So like GitHub Gist, for example, or GitHub Pages, like those are products that people like use and depend on, but there's not a lot of like attention to those things. So like the trending is how many years there? We're 2024, so like 6 years ago, someone threw this together. Actually, not someone. A few team members threw this together and it existed and got some iterations and hasn't been touched since. So the trending is really it's focused around stars. Now internally, when I was at GitHub, we did look at other things for like outreach and identifying like who's going to use like future GitHub Actions features and code spaces, and we did use things like issues, issue authors, and commit velocity as metrics, but that's not recommended. Or sorry, that's not represented in the algorithm.
Got it. And so when we were sort of launching it, it's also, as you mentioned, it's very much launching on GitHub. I feel it's very much like Product Hunt. Like we didn't launch on Product Hunt this time because we thought it was just like so much overhead. It's like because you're trying to get all your ducks in an order. Like it essentially feels like you're going to battle. Like you have to arrange everyone in the team, external, like whoever you can, to sort of like mention, talk, share, tweet about your repository. And your whole call to action is please come to my repository and take a look. So it's like if you have anyone on your newsletter, share with them. If you have like friends or you have investors, like can they at a specific time share about this? Like you have to do all these things sort of for everyone to sort of just to get a huge funnel to your repository, I feel.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's not too unlike, and I think what we're actually kind of witnessing right now is a shift of like what open source is. We're seeing a lot of different shifts. Like I just had a whole podcast this morning about local first and how that's like kind of changing how people think about developing on the internet or developing developer tools. And like the shift that we saw in the last 30 years is like open source was free as in beer. So it was all about like contributing or being a part of a society or a community to now like in the last like 10 15 years you're seeing more startups being built out on the back or on top of open source, and then you see all these large cloud infrastructures absorbing open source to build out the next Google Cloud or AWS. So what we're seeing right now is like if you treat your product like a product or treat your open source project like a product and you have like a proper launch, you'll see it's actually easier to get traction on GitHub than almost any other place, but it's not many people treat it as if you're launching. They just sort of click the button and then hope for the best. And the hoping for the best thing doesn't exist anymore with 100 million plus developers on the platform. You gotta put some attention or juice or like leverage a network or a Discord or a community to like do a proper launch. And I think we've seen a lot of like so before Daytona, like last month we saw Zed and sort of Rust powered the Atom team from GitHub basically built a new product and company called Zed. And
That was really cool. That launch went really well, I think. I mean,
yeah,
love to hear your insight.
yeah, so they ended up getting like 10,000 stars in a week, and but it was the same thing that you did. Like all those folks they're all in the former Hubber or the Zubber Slack. So like they've got a network of like a bunch of people who care about Atom and care about the new version of this built on Rust, and you just get a giant amount of momentum to then say, okay, there you go. Also, they had a large user base as well. So like Zed had been around for 2 years prior to open sourcing, which was like it's a moment. You get a lot of traction, get a lot of attention. They now build out extensions that have been around for a while, but now you have a lot more context on how to build that stuff. So like there's a lot of momentum. And actually, I'll mention this because I had a blog post that I was going to go live on this week, but I'm going to postpone it because we have some features that would actually companion with this blog post a lot well. But I don't know if there's a title I go with, but it's like growth hacking killed the GitHub star. And it's like about the inflation of stars, the fact that people know stars exist and that it's a metric that everyone pins success to. It's changed how we approach how we start repos and how we showcase like what projects are. So yeah, I think stars are better than even like clicks on like through your website, because like stars show that people who are highly invested in your tool do want to see what the source code looks like, want to find the documentation, and can use GitHub as like that sort of control plane of how do I discover more about this project and keep tabs on what the engineers are doing.
No, absolutely. And to your point, when we were doing our research, because we hadn't open sourced anything before, like actual open source, and then we went out and called everyone, again, including you. And the vast majority of people, to your point, was like, "Oh, that's super easy. You just sort of like put your code on GitHub and that's it." And then it's like basically you're just leaving it to circumstance. And in the world where we live in, there's no more circumstance. You either are really prepared to launch something, or it just sits there, sort of, I feel. There might be exceptions to the rule, but similar to Zed and other companies that have launched fairly successfully, there's a lot of work that's gone into that and thinking about, oh, and not just like the source code, how it looks and what's there, but everything around the repository, like all your tags in there, are your releases in there, is there a roadmap in there, is your security file in there, how do you contribute, like all these things that I feel are logistical. They're not even about your product, sort of add to that, not just like getting the people in there, but obviously that is a task on its own.
Yeah, and like that actually leads into something that what I loved about Daytona being a mature product that open source is like you build trust with even like your future customers and your future partners down the road. Because a lot of what we're doing at open source is like we have a bunch of data and like a lot of our product is open source. We have some things that are still closed source for reasons that we need to figure out, like how do we make sure everything's secure. But like to talk to an enterprise customer, at least on the open source side, and being able to show them like this is how the sausage is made, gives them like we could check a box sooner without having SOC 2 compliance to say, okay, like you could see exactly what we're doing. So like if you have some trust about like what we're opting into, what access we have, you can see literally the code and how we're using it, which is like it speeds up. For me, it's been speeding up the conversations, some of these conversations.
No, for sure. And I have to add on that. When we talk to, so we have basically the larger product, which is Daytona Enterprise, let's call it, which has security, like on the application layer, like a lot of security parts. Under that, there's like a lot of infrastructure parts spinning up and spinning down infra. And then there's like the developer experience part about just the development environment. And we sort of pulled that part out and made that a product on its own, or a binary, and allowing people now, like fully open source, use that. But the large enterprise product, it's still not public. And so this is something just we're thinking about, and we probably should do, is you don't even have to open source it in the sense of licensing. If you're looking for larger customers, what you're talking about, it's just like having the source code visible, available, even if it's proprietary, pushes these conversations with large customers. It makes them much faster because they can look at the code, as you mentioned, without asking you for anything, without looking at anything else. It's like, they can just look at it and sort of like feel comfortable with it.
Yeah, that's the thing that like y'all chose to Apache 2.0 this license your repo,
Yep.
which I don't know if you have context on that decision.
Yeah, I do actually. So so we looked at all the licenses. So when we were thinking about how to open source the product, so one, I'll take a step back. So if we looked at the enterprise product, which is a huge product, you actually need a whole cluster to spin it up, right? So you have to have a cluster to be able to spin it up. And so we're thinking about, oh, do we open source this? And then we thought that it's basically not useful for the individual developer because it doesn't solve anything. If you as a developer have to like spin up a cluster to get it up and running, there's no value for you, right? It's just like it's too much of a load on the one hand. And then so my co-founder, which is here as well, I think listening, he said we won't open source it until there's value to the single user, right? And so we found it by pulling out this one section. So essentially, Daytona is now open core in that sense. Like the core of a product is open source, but not the wider layers of that. And the core on its own, we believe that that is something the developer, the individual user has value from, but not the company. So the company being the buyer. And the buyer has value, we believe, from the orchestration, so removing headaches from DevOps people, and from security, removing headaches for security people. And so those two things are 100% proprietary. We might source available them, but we won't open source them in that sense because that is a risk to the company. But this part we believe can give value to everyone, and we don't believe that it will risk our potential customers there. And because of that, we wanted to make it as open as we possibly could. And so it's Apache 2.0 instead. It could have potentially been MIT, but the biggest difference is that it still says Daytona in there and you can't sort of remove that. And so we sort of just wanted that part in there, but it's basically as open source as you can get and you can use it as much as you want. So because we don't think there's risk to the business Daytona, we wanted to make it as open as we can and have the community embrace that.
Yeah, it's sorry to jump in. I don't know if there's any other questions, but I was just going to speak on that. We 2.0 Apache 2.0 our stuff for the same reason. Like we have like disjointed parts that builds open source, but the core is our front end, and then also our API, and then we've got some services that power the stuff as well. But we also own the trademark of open source, and I feel like that's a fun enough name that we want to make sure whoever says open source, it comes back to us.
Yeah. Exactly. I love that you did that. So, by the way, I don't know if we can have questions in here. If anyone has questions, feel free to like raise your hand or whatnot. We're happy to like, because we're not sure about the direction of the conversation. I'm happy to talk about anything about open sourcing. So, so specifically on this theme, I think Brian, like we talked to a bunch of like open source lawyers specifically to like understand all the licenses, and it's not simple. I mean, I don't find it simple anyway. Just like reading through all the licenses and understanding sort of what allows people to do what and what allows you to sort of retain. So it took us a while to actually get to the conclusion that Apache 2.0 is the best, we believe, for the product, while keeping everything else, keeping the proprietary stuff proprietary. Sorry.
Yeah. I think we also took a lot of inspiration from Adam Jacob et al. At System Initiative, right? So Adam's certainly written a ton about this, like in total, but also just in the last couple of months, as I think lots of things have changed. And the System Initiative repository and also their docs has, I think, a really clear sort of expectation of the project, but not just like, hey, this part is open, but this is us. And, the only people you get this part from is us. And I think that's the, I think this is I don't even know how many companies I've worked with, but companies I've worked for, I think it's 7 now, 7 open source companies, almost all of them Apache. It's very different than, say, like the Cloudera days where we were actually part of, the actual Apache upstream, and, we didn't own those projects, and that was almost a very freeing thing to sort of now where you really do have to watch out for. So I worked at Docker for a long time, and lots of people love Docker, but the first time that people had to made a project that was like, this is my Docker workbench, and Docker had to say, hey, y'all can't use that name, that's our name. Just watching people be really upset about that, but you have to do it. I think that's something that you need to make clear in your project up front so that you can do the right thing, and also people can understand what it's about.
Absolutely. Nico, are you still here? Do you want to sort of run through some of the things that we did while we're launching him? while we were launching
sure.
Daytona?
Sure. So I basically had some questions for Brian, but uh, I don't know. It's not only a product; it's a distribution. So we all know that GitHub stars can be vanity metric or whatever, but if you don't get eyeballs and you have a greatest product, what's the value? So it's really crucial to get to as many developers as you can. And we tried everything. We really like to experiment, and we were playing a lot with everything, with memes on Reddit, with everything, just to get those eyeballs. And this is basically a very rewarding, because we got a lot of comments and suggestions, and we got a lot of. We have like. We just recently had a first PR from the external contributor, which is like a validation that you are basically doing something that makes sense. So just a general commentary, but I don't know. Maybe it would be great to get some questions from the people joining the. So you need to request. So that you need to send a request so I can add you as a speaker.
While they're doing that, did you have the questions for Brian that you wanted to? Feel free to ask them. I can continue, but feel free.
You mentioned a trademark, Brian. So would love to learn more about your like whole stance on the intellectual property in open source. That not only is related to licenses, but all other like traditional IP.
Yeah, and this is something that I don't have a strong stance. It's just more of I wanted to make sure that what we're doing is not copycatted and or built in different other ways, because open source is, it could be like a generic name, but it's like specific to us and like our ethos. So like we did I guess a little bit of history about open source. Like it was an open source project that I built. I kind of rebuilt multiple times, and like the underlying technology is what I always tested. So in order to get a bunch of GitHub data, I did a couple of different things. Like originally, it was a bunch of GitHub actions that did some cron jobs to eventually populate a database. Today, we're doing something a little more, like way more complicated. But the idea, the trademark, was because I knew I wanted to build a company out of it. I knew I wanted to open core it, and I knew that open source needed, like, we had a strong brand already. So in the U.S., for anybody who's not in the U.S., we established a Delaware C corp. So that way we could take a little bit of angel funding to kick this off. And then for $500, we also established for the U.S. a trademark on open source. So because we have an interesting spelling, it's got the D at the end, so past tense. Because if you don't got sauce, then you lost, and we are 100% getting people lost in the sauce. But yeah, that was basically just so we can then have something then say that in our repos or Apache 2.0, we do own the trademark. If you build like open source 2 or Bill's open source, then we can basically say, hey, we'd actually prefer if you didn't call yourself the same thing. And this is something I just learned at GitHub. GitHub has a very strong legal arm as well, and they also they have actually some of the best lawyers at GitHub when it comes to open source law and language. And what's actually interesting is they all use GitHub because GitHub actually Git in particular is like one of the best version control management software to keep all the legalese and all the changes that happen in documents very clear. So there's like a whole lawyers on GitHub thing that actually no one knows about. But yeah, that was a thought. And I also got, I mentioned I took angel money. One of the folks who wrote the terms and conditions for GitHub on how like data use and stuff like that, had a lot of conversations with them, like early days when I was like establishing this to make sure that we were within bounds of what we're doing with GitHub data, but also with how we establish this original product. So I don't know if I answered that question, but I just gave you some more context.
Yeah, sure. Lawyers make the world go round. Nothing without lawyers. But IP in general is really important, and like managing the portfolio and all the assets, it's really crucial. So we don't have any speaker requests. I see Chad is in the stream. He has some demo. He's
We have a
listening to
request.
Spaces.
We have a request. We have
Yeah,
a request.
perfect.
Yes.
Okay. Sure. Sheikh, hi. It's connecting. Yeah, you can unmute yourself and join the conversation.
Hello everyone.
Hi.
I have a question about this tool which is going to be built in public. So how come it is useful for the machine learning and deep learning engineers instead of full stack engineers?
That's a great question. Basically, Daytona is useful for every developer, and especially those that are on fringes. Like they don't want to deal with all the complexities of development environments, and they just want to dig into data, like do the data science or machine learning or whatever. So basically, Daytona should allow you to just start working. So that's the gist of it. Like Daytona is moving all of those requirements that you need to have to set up the environment, and that you usually lose a lot of time, especially if you are like switching between projects. Ivan, would you like to add something maybe?
No, I think you did it pretty well.
I suggest, yeah, please, Ivan.
No, I was gonna say I was just shifting gears. So if you have another question, Sheikh, feel free.
Oh, thank you.
So maybe we can have someone from the team join. I don't know. Ivan.
Yeah.
Oh,
Brian's
yes,
gonna
Brian.
say something.
Yeah, I was gonna just throw maybe a spicier question for the Daytona team, which is like we all saw the Planet Scale thing this week about like the free tier and how they're basically going away with that.
Yep.
The one thing I had some thoughts on this, and I'd be love to hear like Daytona's response to this as well. Like Planet Scale is it's a product. Actually, I don't know how many people know about Planet Scale and how the product's built, but it's a MySQL hosted. They've got a bunch of really cool features. Hired a lot of like the early GitHub Actions team who actually built a lot of those features, and they turned off their free tier. But what's interesting about this is their free tier is actually open sourced, which they're a little bit removed because Vitesse is the actual project that Planet Scale is built on top of. And the challenge is like Vitesse is actually a complicated software and requires a lot of like knowledge around databases and sharding. So like the free tier is like use open source, which is that wasn't in their messaging earlier this week. But I was curious about like Daytona and like is there a free tier for Daytona, or is it the hope that folks will just use Daytona open source?
So here's the thing. So with the open source, I'll give you sort of a history of us, and so what we think about like free. So way back in 2009, whatever, we created a company called or product called Code Anywhere. So it was like one of the first, if not the first, cloud IDEs like as products. It still exists, so codeanywhere.com. And it's basically a browser based. So it's like Code Spaces before Code Spaces, like a decade before. And the issue with that type of product, very similar to Planet Scale, it was never that big, is at one point we had a free tier as like all SaaSes do. So it's like free for whatever X hours a month or whatever it was. And then you paid depending on your usage. And so we at one point, we never raised much money. We said just like a little angel round. But because we weren't VC backed, we couldn't actually absorb the free tier in the sense of cost, because free tier is actually just marketing, right? It's the cost that you have for customer acquisition. It's essentially CAC, because you're trying to get users via free tier, right? And so we did that as well with Code Anywhere a decade ago. And so we understand the pains that people have and why they do that. And so fast forward 2023, when we founded Daytona, one of the learnings was that enterprises are the people that will buy this, and they want it on-prem. So the first product, the enterprise product, was on-prem. But when we were thinking about like the same sort of PLG, product-led growth motion, bottom up, like how do we give this into people's hands, we actually said that we're not going to do a SaaS product. Like we're not going to do it because it incurs so much cost and so much overhead, and then you end up having to do something like Planet Scale did last week. And so we were thinking about how do we give, and this is a sentence from Baruch, which used to work at JFrog, he works at Grail now, is like he said, for developer tools specifically, give the magic for free and charge for creating order and chaos, or something like that. Baruch give it for free in the way of the open source product. And so that's why the open source product is actually, you have a binary that you can sort of execute, and you get to run Daytona on your host, on your give out for free. So sorry I went long. I don't know if I answered it, but feel free like begin on that question.
No, that was good, and I know a bit about your about the Daytona journey as well. So I thought that context is actually super helpful.
Yeah, I think like you know, I think about Docker Hub a lot, and how many people like got used to it but never wanted to pay for it. I think, you know, especially in developer tools, the free tiers are just really difficult, and I think the notion of like, you bring your compute and then we can give you that, because that's really the compute and the data and the networking are what costs money. So if you can help us do that, then we can help give you value in a way that scales. Otherwise, it will be eventually, you know, if your paid product doesn't cover your free tier, which for developer tools most developers won't convert. Yeah, that's just it will get pulled at some point.
I also wanted to add on this, thanks Chad for picking that up, is that like we all assume that like all products for a PLG motion, like all SaaS products can give away things for free. And that's probably true for like, you know, support or an ERP or whatever, where the cost of compute is really low for giving out something like this. But for when the cost of compute is high with development environments, and I'm guessing databases in this case as well, then that sort of starts hurting a lot. And what Chad said, it's very different from a standard, I would say, enterprise type app or a productivity app, where those people can bring it into the company and actually swipe their credit card and pay and use it every day in their private life as well. Whereas developers really oftenly, as individuals, don't pay for developer tools. That's been my learning. I'm not sure if people feel the same way, but I found that historically to be true.
Yeah, I worked. So I mentioned I worked at GitHub, but I also worked at this company called Netlify pretty early. Like I was like the third employee in the gate, and like 2015 to 2018, very clear. Like compute was cheap. AWS now gives you like credits for 2 years. Before it was just like felt unlimited at that point. And there's like some constraints after a couple years of when you actually start to pay money. But what I'm getting at is like everyone did this sort of per user, per seat plan. And we're seeing like a shift right now in the industry of, and I think it really came down to like Snowflake and a lot of the stuff that they put out there around their usage-based billing. A lot of folks are actually following that in suit, which is kind of making a lot of this is complicated because eventually someone's going to have to pay for those servers. And if developers only paying $5 or paying $0, it makes it very awkward. And I remember seeing a lot of like your original product. I remember there was one called Nitrous, which was like a code editor.
There was. Yeah, there was.
Yeah, and I remember they basically just like they got to the point where they just had so much adoption, but they couldn't really like get over to the like go up market to actually make money on the product. And they ended up shutting down. And I remember like at Netlify, we ended up absorbing a lot of their users.
I remember that. They had this new product that was similar to Netlify, and then you absorbed the users.
Yeah. And it's like, unfortunately, a lot of companies end up dying around that time. So, but now we have hopefully sustainability. Like folks are figuring out open source is a good way to get like your foot in the door and have conversations to have that bottom up. I think at GitHub we had the free private repos that sort of cut over in 2020. But prior to that, everyone was just like paying the $5 and like just happy with that. And it got to the point I remember. So I was like pre-acquisition at Microsoft, and that the question came up of Microsoft acquired us. First thing we're doing is we're going to unlock private repos, and then it was like literally 3 months of conversations. I wasn't in all of those. I was like on the outskirts, to be quite honest. But there was like, okay, what happens if we pull the rug for this? Like, is there enough enterprise to sustain what Microsoft needs out of GitHub's acquisition? And the answer ended up becoming yes. Like we just needed to like double down on some other products. But that was also a shift like in the actions, where actions you now pay 1,000 minutes for free or something like that. I forgot whatever the pricing is now today, but like public repos, free action minutes, private repos, you got to pay for after whatever the X amount is, and it's a moneymaker for GitHub. And then same thing with Copilot, it's a moneymaker.
Yeah, it's just so easy. Or the Actions is just so easy to use, and then it's easy to go through it when you really start to use it.
Yeah, and I don't know if like any other compute, like there's a lot of other like function type competitors out there as well. Because Actions was actually, it was really serverless functions, to be honest, but with servers and VMs. And then it turned into CI eventually post Microsoft acquisition. But I think at a level that GitHub is like one of the few companies that could start with a product like that, not have to worry about massive adoption and cost, and then have it pay off for them later. And I think that's like the bet that a lot of these later stage, earlier stage, like VC backed companies have to make is like, do we double down on this like free developer motion, or do we offer the open source path where you can self-host and bring your compute along for the ride, as opposed to like we do everything and we'll pay for everything.
Yeah. I mean, that's the bet, right? Specifically there. So if we take Daytona, like let's call it a competitor in that sense, like we're not because of ways, it's because of distribution, but in the sense of like code spaces, right? That's a very capital intensive thing, and it's free for everyone to a point, right? But you can use that if you end up liking it, you can use it up really fast, and then you're charged basically by the hour. And so that's also specifically why we didn't go in that direction. It's like we don't want to be competing there at all, especially because they have Azure, behind them. And so can we give a similar offering to everyone that they don't ever have to pay for it? And will people eventually like it? I mean, looking at GitHub stars seems so, but I think time will tell if our bet it ends up, panning out.
Yeah, and the CodeSpace is a thing that, and I've shared this with you in private conversations, but like CodeSpace is a thing that we did explore. Like, could we do a similar thing to Actions, and like, could we open this up for people to have like mass adoption? And it was the cost was the reason it never was like as easy. And I when I left GitHub, so I had like everything free for GitHub because I was an employee, and then I left it for 3 months. I ended up paying like $80 a month for CodeSpaces because like we ended up building a lot of our like anybody who contributed, we have like a very clear path to drop it in a CodeSpace and make a contribution. And that's because I worked at GitHub, made that path, and immediately anybody in the org was like charging me, or I was paying $80 a month for just a handful of folks to have a better developer environment. And it was enough for me to basically say, okay, I'm going to slow this down. But it's just one of those things like when when the costs become real, then you got to make like different decisions, which we did. We just shut that off.
Yeah, just a company. So I'll plug here right now for Daytona. So anything you made for CodeSpaces will work out of the box with Daytona, just like on local. Just so you know, same flow. Just point to that repo. So that's just a plug on Daytona here.
Yeah, and to go back to the original question around like these like y'all are open source and like metrics now to look at, because like stars is really good for like that big bang. Like you started a thing, like the next 6 months you can kind of gauge adoption and interest through stars. But I do want to bring up something that I talked to Brendan Burns on our podcast. So I run a podcast on Open Source's YouTube channel. Talked to Brendan Burns, who's like one of the first folks to help, like co-founders, co-creators of Kubernetes while at Google. And he gave me like this like really strong insight about how they track success for Kubernetes. And like to summarize it as quick as possible, like issues show interest. So if you have issues that go up on a cadence, like you can see there's some interest of people trying this thing out. They hit a pain point, or they have some questions or ideas for other features. Like whether or not you close them, I think that's probably not the best thing to look at on velocity of like, did the issue close in 30 days? Like, does that matter? If issue closed 2 years later, I think that's also still valid. And I think we don't want to attach like SLAs to closing issues, especially in open source. But then PRs are something different where it shows adoption. So if you can see other PRs being open that are outside the core team or outside Daytona, then you could like now track anybody outside Daytona, like what companies they represent, what projects they represent. Because like there's probably a company that wants to use Daytona and how to edge case and wanted to get something upstream, and the approachability, the friendliness of a project becomes another metric that like eventually we'll have an open source that we can show. I don't know if we'll call it friendliness, but basically like identifying the health as soon as you come in. So like Brendan basically said, if he goes into an open source project because now he's running like SVP of Azure Compute or something like that at Microsoft, he just wants to go in a repo, find out, is it a good neighborhood to like hang out in? Meaning that can he make a contribution? Can he open an issue? Can he participate and have something happen, have some influence? If not, then he doesn't have a lot of bandwidth and time, so he's going to move on to the next thing. And that's something like for Daytona, for anybody who open source, like what are the next steps? And those are things on the open source platform that we're shipping. Next week we'll have an announcement about how you can see like the full on vision of what's happening in your project.
Sorry, that's actually that's awesome. I'm looking forward to that. I have to say we got a PR in probably like the first hour that we open sourced Daytona, and I have to tell you, the whole engineering team, which is probably here as well, was actually super nervous to make sure that the person felt welcome, because like we've never accepted a PR. Like you don't know how to act. You want to make sure that you converse with the person properly and whatnot. And there's a lot of things there that you actually don't know. I feel it's like for people in the space, it's very much something that is assumed that you know, but when you're doing the first time, you don't know that very well. So any tips on how to do that well?
Yeah, this is something that, and I spent a lot of, so I spent 5 years at GitHub, and I got to see every feature that everyone uses and saw ship in the last 5 years. I got to be in the room for. So like things like GitHub sponsors, Copilot, code spaces, GitHub Actions. Like I got to help be an advocate for a lot of those products, and also shout out to some folks who are also on my team, like Rizal, who's in the chat, that helped out with the code spaces and Copilot. But what I'm getting at is like you don't know who's coming in for like the PR. A lot of times people don't open issues first, so you can get like a drive by PR. The thing that I really wanted to work out on open source, like the original goal was like, can I get a story of who this person is? Like, is it a first time contribution, or are they a baller and have done like multiple contributions in multiple projects that I should probably know about? And so what we did is we built these things like GitHub profiles, but on open source, where you see all contributions in one place. Because there was a story, another podcast interview with Ankur, who spent a little bit of time at Figma, leading ML over there. He opened a PR in a project, and it was a project that had a maintainer who was like maintaining 90 plus Python projects. And he was like, hey, I just like quick fix. I don't know if I did the thing right. And he got met with like some friction of like, hey, I don't have time to like debug your PR. Could you like this, make sure it's ready to go when you open the PR or whatever? And it kind of turned him off like immediately to like not want to contribute. And this person's got like, he's now running a brain trust and a whole nother company now. So not like the 100,000 Twitter follower individual, but like he knows how to write code. He knows how to make impact, and he works for a company that could possibly fund and do GitHub sponsors as a person. So the thing that we worked on a lot at GitHub was like trying to figure out like if a maintainer is struggling and doesn't have the bandwidth to like address PRs, like how could you know who you're interacting with, and how could you treat them like a potential, I don't know, pipeline customer, like treat it like turn your SE hat on and like find a solution alongside of them. Because a lot of times maintainers get burnt out. Like we saw Express recently get like 100 random drive-by PRs because of a YouTube video. So maintainers' time they're very sensitive in their time. So I guess what I'm getting at is like approaching contributions coming from the outside is like I probably would recommend like conversations, perhaps jump on Zoom calls for some of the first earliest PRs to find out like what drove you. I mean, it's all stuff you already know, Ivan, and Chad, about like doing proper onboarding and customer evidence. But like find out like what drove them to open the PR, like what's their pain point that they're trying to solve. And I think a lot of open source maintainers and first time open source folks that might be listening to the chat might not think through like, oh, I should probably just like jump into like a Discord chat and discover more of like how we got here, as opposed to like close it, won't work, or not going to fix. And I do respect that not everyone has the bandwidth to do that. So which is why we're trying to build features in open source to have a better picture of who's coming into your project.
Awesome. Definitely looking forward to that. Do we have just one question here by Spaces Dojo? Like just if you have a question, feel free to ask.
I don't have any specific question, but I wanted to say I'm enjoying the discussion so far. I I worked at Replit as a developer advocate a while ago for about a year. So, I totally get the challenge of, providing free resources for free. I guess if you did, was it like Code Anywhere, on Dockers or something, then you'll need to have like many instances potentially running. So totally get that.
Awesome. Thanks for joining. Also, we have Rizal and Andrew here. They're shy. They're not good being part of the conversation, but I'm happy to have you all here anyway. Cool. Do we have, I mean, we're almost up on time. Brian, do you want to, anything you want to touch on, or do you want me to sort of like, I have a few other things I can share, but.
Yeah, I would say that this is your open source launch has been like definitely a case study, and I look forward to like reading the blog posts and the tips and tricks and as like whatever y'all feel like you want to share. But I think the best thing about open source is that we get to learn from each other. And I think if we all like hit that publish button in different silos and never look back at the project because we got disappointed because no one came through or we didn't get 100 stars in the first day, I think that there are some clear learnings that anybody who wants to open source the next thing that they could probably take from this. And so I'd probably recommend jump into like y'all have a Discord. I don't know if you have a community.
We have Slack.
Got a Slack? Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, you gotta come to the other side. But yeah, like having conversations with folks who have done it before is like one of the best things you could do. Like one of the things I do as like a founder of a project is I do dinners with like founders at SF, and the reason for that is like anybody who's like has at least 6 months more experience than I do in running a company, I learn a ton. And I think if we all like reached out to a maintainer and bought them a coffee, or like sent them $10 on the GitHub sponsors or whatever it is, I think extending the olive branch ends up like everyone gets. Well, I guess the term I'm looking for is like the rising tide raises all boats. So my recommendation is like reach out and have conversations. And I know a lot of folks, they do have social anxiety, don't want to like get on calls and do stuff like that. But writing a quick thank you note is actually like a legit way just to like extend the olive branch as well. So like star, heart, favorite, react, do all the above.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. Sorry, Ivan, please.
Oh, I was just going to add on this like 100%. And I feel that people are very much so like we live in a place, even if you have social anxiety. So I've had like a lot throughout my life, although some people might not say that anymore. But even like if in person is hard, like virtual is really easy. Right now, I remember when I was switching careers and started doing developer advocacy. And so I didn't know much about it. I basically reached out to people on LinkedIn that had that job title. And so people from like, Netflix or anywhere else would just reply. I think half the people, my message was on LinkedIn or Twitter, whatever, like, hey, I have this new role. I have no idea what I'm doing. I'd love to learn from you. That's the entire message. And half the people I sent it out to replied. And I think like 60% of people that replied got on a like Zoom call with me and told me about what they're doing. So quite similar to like fast forward now, like open sourcing, like I pinged you and I pinged like a bunch of people, like, please tell me what you know and how to do it. And just another thing that comes of all that is one, you learn from the person, and two, that person is more likely to share and repost and invite people to your project as well. So it's like a double success thing that you have. Obviously, hopefully you'll help. Yeah, absolutely. And so it's like counterintuitive. If you ask a person a favor, you think like they'll never help you, like that you owe them now. You do. I absolutely. So Brian, I absolutely do owe you. But on the other flip side, like you'll also reshare it when I post it, which brings in more people from your circle into the project as well. And so that's probably like baseline first thing you can do. And we'll definitely write up a blog post, Nico and I, about all the rest of the tactics, I guess, that we did. Because you never know, like we were also at one point, maybe we only get 100 stars. And then what happens? Then you sort of like failed and we'd be super sad. But the team, we're probably at 2,500 now after 2 days, and no one has slept for the last 2 weeks, I think. But
I'm not checking even anymore. I just told Ivan like it's been 3 days. And he told me, like, no, dude, it was like 30 hours, not more. It felt like 3 days. So basically, but I love one of the points you said, like, you get a lot of experience from these events, and the experience is not counted in the amount of time you have, but the amount of events you witnessed. So basically, even if you have one day of some specific experience, it's really valuable, and you should share it with others. So it's really important to share. We obviously get a lot. Ivan was really like pinging everyone. We were jumping on calls. We got a lot of advice. You always have some like good and bad advice, whatever, but you need to be critical and understand what to do. So for sure, we will try also to get back to the community and all the friends, and we will. I have it on my to-do list. I will try to do it this weekend while it still is fresh, because for sure I will forget otherwise. And we will try to get back at least with sharing the advice. Do we have maybe some questions or something? I'm really bad because we had Stephen Tay here recently. He did a great work with dub.co. He left. Do we have maybe someone with a question or something to add?
If not, people here that want to actually see demos or ask other questions about the product can jump over to the YouTube, and I'll be there for probably the next hour doing.
Can you share the YouTube link here so that people can jump on?
Yeah, I mean,
share it right here.
Probably.
Try to share. We have a question in the meantime, I think. Spaces? Well.
Yeah, I was gonna try to help you guys out because no one was asking a question. And you might have covered and you might have covered this already a little bit, but I'm curious about, how you think about your sort of marketing and sales funnel. You mentioned, I think your end goal is basically enterprise, to make your company profitable, right? So how do you go from, open source adaptations or free trials, things like that, to eventually enterprise sales?
Oh, so we went the other way around. So the company's been doing enterprise sales for 11 months since we incorporated. So we did the enterprise first and the open source second. So it's quite different from like the majority of companies that start with the open source. I have to say that it would probably been easier if we started open source first because it's easier to iterate. But yeah, we already have customers in pipeline and whatever. This part, if we're looking at how it helps the enterprise product, probably just the brand gets, or the way of work becomes acknowledged among developers, and that would probably hopefully will indirectly help with the top-down sales motion. So that's basically it. Welcome. Chad, did you find the link? Or did you find where to post the link?
I found a link, but I'm not sure where to post the link.
Yeah, is there nowhere to post something here?
Yeah, if you hit the plus on the bottom right, if you're on the phone, it adds it to the thread, and then you can pin it.
Ah, okay. Chad,
yeah, I've done a lot of spaces.
I see that. We have not done that many spaces. I've just listened to spaces. Have not talked a lot.
Oh, well, welcome. Glad to break you in.
Yeah, absolutely. I find them, they're easy though. They're fun. So happy to do them more. Chad, once you get that posted,
I'll put it in. I'll put it in Slack, and then you can post it because I'm actually on. I'm on my desktop, and so
put it in Slack.
Twitter. I mean, the space works great on my desktop, at least as a participant.
Yeah, I've not done the desktop yet because I'm early Spaces user, and it's always been buggy trying anything new on Spaces. So
sure.
Yeah, I found that there is a bit of bugs here for sure. So,
so Brian,
actually,
my whole screen was full of emojis. Not sure what happened, but like the whole screen, I couldn't even see who is in the.
Yeah. I was going to say I actually know the team that built Spaces. Well, I know some of the team members. It was actually the Periscope team, if anybody remembers Periscope from years ago.
Yep.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Sure.
That was like the live streaming video thing, and like the last thing they did. Well, the guy I know who works on the team, last thing he did before he left was build Spaces. And he has like a really interesting open source story because after he left, he ended up kind of like trying to figure out what he wanted to do with his life after that acquisition, and built the OBS Virtual Cam Mac extension. So like in 2020, OBS got really big because of Twitch streaming, and then he built like a Mac to be able to do Zoom calls through OBS, or whatever that. I forgot what the repo is. Anyway, now it's in the main product. But the thing I wanted to share about that is that during that time, he had one contributor at open source for this project. It was like a 16-year-old in like the Midwest who just like hacked on this like during the pandemic with him, and that was like a story, an amazing story because now that kid's in college and he has a mentor for life that's had successful exits, and you never know who's going to be coming into your repo asking, "Hey, can I help on a thing?" And it's like definitely worth like entertaining because you don't know who folks are who are going to make contributions. I've got other stories about open source contributors and what they're doing now, but I know we're at pretty close to time.
Yeah, I'm not finding how to post this here. I hit the plus and I pasted it and not doing it. I feel like such a noob right now. It's insane. Super bad. Can't do that.
Well, if you just go to my Twitter profile, it's at the top.
Yes.
So
Go to Chad's Twitter profile, and we'll also put on
there.
Daytona's profile as well.
Yeah.
Hold up, Nico, can we post it on Daytona's profile?
All right, I just got
Yeah,
it.
you did it.
There it is.
You did
Yeah,
It just showed up.
so
You
I
got
just
it?
Perfect.
yeah I pinned it to the jumbotron is what that
Thank
is.
you.
That's called.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate that, Ryan. All right, we're up on time, so 1 minute left. Thank you all so much. Not going to ask for any more questions because I don't think we have any more. Thank you all for joining. We'll be hopping on Chad's stream, and we'll be publishing the article real soon, and we'll share it on Daytona's Twitter or X profile the next week, hopefully. So thank you all.
Thank you all.
See ya. Thanks for having me.
See you.
Later.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye, everyone. Start the GitHub Rebel.
All right. Let's go back to work. We're gonna go. What are we doing? So let's do git checkout main. Git status. Git branch releaser. So I was playing around with stuff. So we're going to go to git checkout releaser. We're going to git add git ignore and dot go releaser git commit work in progress. And now we will git checkout main git reset hard origin main. There we go. All right. Drop that. Don't save. So let me make this smaller. This is the bash script. We've got lots of feedback that people want solutions other than bash script, which we will totally do. But for now, that's what we have. So I'm going to git branch, and we're going to say we're going to call this the make-dir fix. Git checkout make-dir fix. All right, so make-dir-p. So if the user added the directory to the path, you know what? I don't think we should do this. I don't think we should make dir. I think that we should... We should check to see if it exists. Yeah, I don't think we should make it. That's just my personal belief on the matter. I think people have been really cautious about scripts and making things. So, yeah, I think that we should not do it. So I'm gonna let Copilot do it. Do you want to create it? Okay, we can leave that there. So that's a Copilot came up with the sort of the intermediate where we prompt them to see if they want it to exist. Let's see. Let's only prompt the user in an interactive shell. So we're going to actually... Is that how you do that? Bash check if shell is interactive. So we're going to actually do this. And we're going to do that. So we're going to pull this out. We're going to pull this out. This is overly complicated. This is overly complicated. We're just going to error. It's the user can figure this out. I don't want to figure this out for the user. I mean, I don't want to make a decision on behalf of the user. we're actually going to do this first before we check sudo. So if you're in chat, welcome. We're working on a fix. So now we're checking if the destination exists. So I want to capture that we are just explicitly deciding to not interesting. I wonder why auto tab complete's not working. So we can test this. We can test this. How? So we're going to do hack get server. So I can move bin to bin old. Now if we run this again, all right, so let's take those out. That doesn't work. I'll just take this out. It's not necessary. Okay. I feel like we should put that check. We should put these checks above the download. Because we know that this will fail So we should fail fast. So the destination directory does not exist, and you don't have the right rights. We're not going to download until those two things are fixed. And then when they're fixed, then we can there we go. Great. So this should actually now be faster. Great. So now we move bin old back to bin. And that should work. Great. So that should be enough. To get this all working. So let's do a quick check to see if this looks good. Great. So we're going to do git add git server. So then if we commit this, so we are not going to all right. That prompt is for signing the key. So you'll see we're going to push this. So we're going to do git push origin. In this case is my fork. We're going to push the make dir fix. Again, that's my YubiKey asking me to do this. We're going to go do that. And I'm going to pull this in here. So we're going to do a pull request, check that the destination exists. Given the concerns folks have about curl pipe bash, we're not going to create the directory automatically. So I feel like those are there. Type of change, I'm going to say that this is a bug fix. It does not require a documentation update. I have reviewed my code. I have definitely commented the code. I have made corresponding changes to the documentation. I'm going to actually put that's not applicable, and we don't add any new warnings. I don't know if Nico created a fix. Contribution steps. official Docker image. Oh, I suppose you could run it inside of Docker, but we won't do that right now. Additional info, prompting screen, add column, URL. Okay, I don't think Nico did that. NA. Oh, that doesn't work. We're going to go, can we edit this? Yeah, we can. All right. We'll do this. Update comment. So this is the verified. When I do sign commits, it shows up as verified. So you can click it and see that I have vigilant mode and my SSH. I signed it with SSH. Hey, Rodney. Yeah. Let's, I'm working on, let me get this pull request merged and then I'll show you. Actually, I think I'm not going to merge it. It needs a code review. So I'll show you. I'm actually going to switch. Let's see. All right. So this is a Mac. I've got Daytona installed. So you can read the docs in the Daytona repo for how to get it installed. But once you have it, we can do Daytona create and a get repo. So what's going to happen here is when I hit this button, hopefully, it's going to create a development environment for me using that repo. Oh, it already exists. So we're going to do Daytona. Delete test. All right, then we're going to create it again. So it's going to create a development environment for me for that GitHub repo, and it will let me tool that so that everything that I need to develop that application is in there. So that's up and running really quickly. I can also do like Daytona SSH if I want to SSH to it. If you think about it, it's kind of like a VM. In this case, I'm running it locally on this Mac, which is in front of me. You can also run it on, the Daytona server could run on a DigitalOcean droplet or whatever. But it's just it's just everything I need for development. So I'm going to exit out of that. And let's see. I can do Daytona code, which will open my IDE, which happens to just be VS Code. So I get everything I need for that repo. So that could be on my laptop or it could be somewhere else. Yeah, so Rodney, that's a great question. So once this opens, I'll show you what it means. So I'm using dev container for this example. And that dev container, which is asking me now if I want to reopen in dev container, which I will in a second here, but let's just talk about what it's going to do. So it's going to open this for me with a container that's inside of it is TypeScript. It's going to run some scripts for me so that when the environment is created, it'll do some automation. And when I attach, or when the IDE attaches to that environment, it's actually going to run the application and open a preview window. So what that looks like is if I rebuild and reopen in a container, it's going to go ahead and launch that for me. We can watch the dev container log scroll by, which is, it's just like any other container. And then once that's done building that dev container, I will actually be inside the IDE. So in this case, VS Code will reopen inside of there, and then I will have everything I need to connect. So TypeScript will be installed, Git will be installed. In this case, I'm using PNP, PNPMP, PNPM as my package manager. And so those are all the things I need to develop that Astro application. And I defined it inside of that dev container. You can also pick a different thing and not use dev container. So out of the box, we have a default container that we use for everything. You can set a container for everything that you want to use. So that's installing all of the dependencies, and it just launched that. So this is the Astro app preview. So I could go make changes. Let's go find source, layouts, main Astro. This is that body. So if we go to pages, index, tailwind button in Astro. Let's see. I want to go ahead and open that here. So browser. So we can put the browser over here. And then I can go change this to tailwind button in Astro for Rodney and save that. And then it automatically reloads it. So I'm just developing this Astro app as we do this. And now let's say that I'm done with this, right? I can close this out, and I can do Daytona delete test, and I more or less throw that application away, or I throw that environment away, and then it's time. I could do either a different application, or let's say it's the next day and I want a clean, fresh environment. I can just launch it again and get another environment. You can also have multiple environments running. So if you're working on an open source project, you can have an environment for that project. If somebody asks you for a code review, you can spin up an environment very quickly just for that code review, make the code review, or make the change that you need to make, and then toss it away and go back to what you were working on, so that you don't have to spend a lot of time installing things into your laptop and making sure you have the right versions of everything. You can just create an environment, do your work, throw that environment away, and your laptop stays clean and easy to use. So that's the high level for Daytona. There's other things that Daytona lets you do, which certainly we can talk more about. Like we can do code. Let's get this application up and running again. Sorry if y'all can hear that construction noise. I apparently have a neighbor that's jackhammering because I'm streaming. I live in San Francisco, and soft stories are a thing here. Soft stories are like most houses have like empty first floors where maybe it's a garage or something. And in the old days, like when my house was built in 1920, they'd only put load-bearing walls on the two sides. And so during an earthquake, the buildings would shake and then they would drop. And there's lots of pictures from the earthquake in the 80s or 90s where the first story basically collapsed. So lots of my neighbors are having their houses rebuilt. Basically, they rip out the entire first story, they jackhammer out the foundation, and they put in a whole new foundation on top of it. That's happening next door as we speak, and I can hear the jackhammering, even if you can't. So we've got this port 4321, and so the other bit I can do is I can do Daytona Ford 4321, and I can make that test. And let's see. Actually, I guess I don't want to do that. I want to do Daytona forward. I want to make it public. We'll see if this actually works. There we go. So if I use this URL and go to a browser, I should be able to see the... Oh, it didn't work. I don't know why it didn't work. It should work. Oh, awesome, Rodney. Thanks for checking that out. Yeah. It seems like if there are Daytona people on here, I'm not... Ivan's not the only person that can't get this to work. It's also me. So it didn't work for me either. It might just be because the reverse proxy isn't getting through whatever my home firewall is. Don't know what it is, but we'll fix that later. I'm going to switch back. So this is also something I'm really excited about. This is my Mac. I'm going to switch back to my Windows box. So this is I have both of them on my stream. I'm really excited about it. All right, so that is launched. Somebody was asking, there was an issue for provide an official Docker image. I bet we could totally do that really quickly. So the release repo that we have is private, but could we make this? I bet we could. I bet we could totally do it. So let's go to let's go back here. And actually, we're going to check out the, we're going to check out the releaser branch. So I was working on git release. So go releaser is in here. So if we open that, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so folks can see. We're going to do 2/3 and put that on 1/3. All right. So I'm going to grab the Go Releaser docs. Go Releaser. I'll pull those in here. So Docker. I don't need to publish it. We're just going to package it. Docker images. Scratch. Let's see. Docker file. Docker. Oh yeah, we'll put the license in there. That'll be good. So we're gonna do let's see. So if we do if we do Docker, let's see, tab that. So we'll do, I'm going to do metcalf C because I control that user space. Go Arch. I'd like to build it for both. So let's put this in here, Go Arch. Fix this. Okay. We're going to build it for Linux. We're going to do that. We're going to Dockerfile, Dockerfile. I'll figure out how to do that in a second. Let's see what else we want to do. Yeah, Rodney, I used to, I have a professional setup. I used to be, I used to do this for a living. Let's see, when I was at Docker, is when I started doing a real setup. IDs to filter the binaries and packages. I don't think I need to do that. I am going to make a Docker file real quick. Real quick, we're going to do Docker file. We're going to call this Daytona. So I'm not 100% sure how this works. So can push Docker images. You can declare they will be matched against binaries generated by builds and packaged by packages generated. They'll be binaries generated by the build section if you only have one build setup. It could be that easy. Okay, that's what it says. So let's see if it is in fact this easy. So we're going to do, I think I've got Go Releaser, don't I? I think I've got Go Releaser. Go Releaser. Let's see what happens. So it's making the arms, it's making the tar balls. Now, okay. So now if we do Docker run metcalf C Daytona latest. Oh, it worked. It totally worked. That's amazing. That's amazing. Okay. So that's cool. So this is a Go Releaser file that will build tarballs for Linux, Windows, and Mac on AMD and ARM, and then should also build Docker for AMD and ARM. That's pretty amazing. So if we go back, does it actually build them for both? Interesting. I think I need to turn on, I think it only built it for x86 because I'm on a Windows box, so Docker's only Windows Docker here. I think I would need to probably set up BuildX with multiple builds with Oops. Let's go talk to, let's see. So if we do Docker cross-platform build, multi-platform. Docker Desktop provides bin format already. It doesn't. Okay. So we should be able to those are builder nodes. I'm not going to add build nodes. I'm not going to do that. Build Alex. Let's see if that, I don't even know if that works. So we're going to do Docker build X ls. Oh yeah, it's got one. It's got one for everybody. Okay. So we want to do AMD and ARM64. So let's do Docker images. All right, so it's got that. Docker build X inspect. Oops. Inspect Metcalf C Daytona latest. But I've got that here. Because I haven't pushed it though. I have not pushed it. So interesting. Okay. Let's see what's going on here. Hey, no problem. No problem, Rodney. Thanks for joining. So that's, we got Dockerfile up and running. We'll send this over to engineering and see if they're interested in Go releaser, but it was pretty cool because we've got, the other thing that it does is because we've got checksum in here, we've already got checksums here too. So it seems like, you know, pretty quickly we have most of this. So I'll go ahead and let's see, let's find this. So we're gonna go to Daytona. Oh, I don't want this, I want this. So let's see what we've got. Diff. Yep. All right, so git add go releaser and git commit amend. Work in progress. Awesome. So we're going to git push origin, make your fix, git push origin, releaser, git push origin. What's the other one? The dev container work in progress. Cool. All those are pushed. So now we've got everything I've been working on somewhere else. So let's save this. Get out of here. Git status. Oh, git add. Go releaser. Git commit amend. We'll force push it. Just want to make sure I don't lose any of these changes. All right, let's go grab Daytona again. Got a bunch of changes in here. Let's go see what's in the issues. So I think we have something for this. We just need to commit it. You got anything else in here that would be fun to work on? Contacts. Alternative installation. Yeah, so we could work on that. Yeah, we'd have to think of how that would work. So, if you have questions, let me know. I'm not sure what else we're going to do. I think I've got most of the things I was going to work on done. So, let's see what pull requests are happening right now. Oh, there's some bounties that have been claimed. Oh, yeah. Look at this. I should probably be doing better job of putting in. This is actually in the, if we go look at the contributions, I think. So let's go look at the contributing. I think this is where this is. Yeah, chores. Yeah, we should actually make a list of what those are. because this isn't, these chores or these features or fixes. I don't think we list out the ones that we use. So prepare changes. I feel like I feel like that's not exactly true. Like, I feel like there are, if we go look at, let's just go look at code and go look at commits. So engineering uses chore, fix, feature. Refactor. But then I guess they don't always, though. Interesting. Let's see, what time is it? Ooh, almost 12. So thanks everyone for joining. We will be doing more. We will stream probably, I think I'm going to try to stream twice a week. It'll generally be 10 a.m. Pacific, 11 San Francisco. And that lets it be 10 a.m. Pacific is 1 p.m. Eastern. So then, it's not terrible for the North American folks. And then for folks in Europe, 10 is 7. So it's not super late. It's late, but it's not the worst. So I think that's probably a really good sort of worldwide time zone. So we will do potentially Fridays, although that's not great for European nighttime going out. Maybe Thursdays, maybe Tuesday, Thursdays, or Monday something. I don't know. We'll figure it out. But we'll make this a more regular thing. And yeah, the goal, I think, is going to be working a little bit on open source, but also asking questions. So, and I will be working on trying to use Daytona for developing Daytona. There's some magic that I need to figure out around get credentials and get configs and all of that I think that, and I'll make an issue for this, that we need to document better so that things just work. I don't know how to make it work yet, because the way that my setup works, I've got this YubiKey where all of my SSH keys are, and so I think I'll have to think about how that would work. Yeah, that'll be really interesting to see. But anyway, thanks for joining. I will see you all soon, and I'll see you next week. Follow us on Twitter, Daytona.io. And then also, if you haven't yet, drop a star in the repo. So we're at 2,400. Hopefully we'll cross over to 2,500 this evening. It'll be pretty awesome. Thank you everybody who has already given stars or feedback or everything. We're really excited that this open source release did so well this week. Now we have to just keep it up. So if you run into any issues, if you are surprised at all when you run Daytona and something doesn't work the way that you thought it would, or you hit an issue, drop us an issue. I think partly, if you are surprised, I'd love to understand how that happened and why, and what you expected to happen that was different. Because even if it isn't an issue, it needs to go into the docs, or we need to think about the UX so that people aren't surprised. But thank you again for joining, and I will see you next week.